Hello and welcome to my very first booktube video. My name is Heather and I love to read, and the one thing I love more than reading is talking about books. So I thought I would give this a go and I hope you enjoy it. I figured the best first video to do would be a favorites list because everybody who watches BookTube loves favorite lists, and I know I do. So I thought I'd start off with my favorites of 2021, and I have a list here of 21 of my favorite books from 2021. It was difficult to get it down to 21 favorites because I read a lot of good books last year. And I thought it would also be a really good way for you to get to know me and my taste in books. Just because last year my passion for reading was reignited. I don't know why. I've always loved to read, but last year it really took off, and I read more last year than any other year in my life. In doing that, I kind of expanded the genres that I read. I typically like thrillers, literary fiction, but I expanded it last year and I got into graphic novels. I got into a little bit of romance, some fantasy, some YA, some middle grade, and it's been super fun. So you'll get to know me a little bit with some of the ones that I really, really loved from last year. Hopefully, full disclosure, there are going to be some books on here that you have heard of ad nauseum on BookTube, but it's because it was worth the hype and they made it onto this list. But hopefully there'll be a couple, one or two maybe, that you have not heard of or have not heard enough about, and maybe this will be the nudge that you need to try it out. So I hope you enjoy this list. And I read 108 books last year, and so yeah, coming up with 21 to put as my favorites was a challenge, but here they are. And I'm going to back up a second. I didn't really take notes other than the notes about the books, but anyways, I don't have the physical books with me here. Not all of them. I have a whopping 2, but that's because of a couple of reasons. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so obviously I don't have a physical book. I check out books from the library, and then also once I buy books and I read them, I will either donate them to a secondhand store, or I'll trade them at a little free library, or I'll just pass them on to somebody I think will enjoy the book. So while I have a pretty extensive home library, they're mostly books that I have not read yet. So I love having books around me, but it's a constant influx and outflux, if that's a word. Anyways, all right, let's get on with the books. Coming at number 21 is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a mystery-ish. No, I'm not going to say mystery. It's a YA, and it is a little bit dark. It follows Mary, who is 16 years old. She spent the last 7 years in jail for being convicted of killing a baby when she was 9 years old. And she is leaving jail, and she's going to be living in a group home with other young women who have been convicted of serious crimes. And it follows her in this situation and dealing with these other women. And it's told in multiple perspectives. It's told from Mary's point of view. It's told from like the transcript from the trial, witness statements, to include the mother of the baby that she killed, and doctors, psychiatrists. It's very interesting how it comes at this situation from multiple angles, and it was very well written. I will be reading Tiffany D. Jackson's other books. I'm really looking forward to. I know the one that was really popular was Monday's Not Coming. So that's on my list. I'm definitely going to be working my way through her backlist. It's very well written. There's a Mondo twist, and yeah, I highly recommend it. And that's the first and last time you're going to hear me say highly recommend in this video because obviously I highly recommend all of these books. They've made it to my favorites list. So yeah, take a shot every time I say highly recommend. I'm gonna try to not say it so much, but we'll see what happens. Coming in at number 20 is Wow, No Thank You by Samantha Irby. This, I think, might be the only nonfiction book on this list. I'm really trying to read more nonfiction as well. This one was a hoot. Samantha Irby is hilarious. This is a collection of essays, and she basically talks about her writing process, being 40, dealing with some illnesses chronic illnesses that she has, dealing with relationships. She talks about how she went to Los Angeles to try to get her writing, I think, sold for a show that she wanted to do. But regardless of all of that, she talks about being a 40-year-old Black woman in a relationship, dealing with illnesses, and it is super, super relatable. Even though I don't think I have been 40, so I can relate to that, but I don't have chronic illness. Obviously I'm not Black, but regardless of all that, super, super relatable, laugh out loud funny, and yeah, I would love to read more of her stuff. Coming in at number 19 is Billy Summers by Stephen King. This, I am a huge fan of Stephen King, always have been. If you are not into horror but are interested in Stephen King, this is a good one to start with because it's not horror. I would say it's just an adult thriller. And I love Stephen King's writing. I will die on that hill. He's fantastic. And I love his horror as well. But this one's not a horror, like I said. It follows Billy Summers, obviously. He's a killer for hire with a heart of gold, of course. Anyways, he wants to retire, but he's hired to do one last job, and he's kind of set up, and it follows him preparing for this job and then going after the people who set him up and all of his shenanigans on the way. And there are lots of shenanigans, and it is a fun ride. It is a page turner. It's a brick. Oh, and this is one of the books I have with me. Billy Summers, beautiful cover. I still have this because I listened to this and it was great to listen to. But I knew my husband would love it, and he doesn't do audiobooks. So I bought this for him for either his birthday or Christmas. And I still have it because I'm going to pass it on to my mom, because my mom's never read Stephen King because she does not do horror. And anyways, I'm going to send this to her. And yes, give it a go. If you haven't read any Stephen King, you won't be disappointed. I'm on Goodreads, and I always rate books, and I forgot to give my ratings for each of these books. So far, each of these books we're at 4 stars out of 5. So do with that what you will. Coming in at number 18 is My Life as a White Trash Zombie by Diana Rowland, either Rowland or Rowland. I'll be putting it up here so you'll be able to see the cover. This is an adult horror, urban fantasy-ish. I mean, it is what it sounds like. It's basically this young girl who is living in, I believe, in Louisiana with her alcoholic father. She's basically into drugs. She's on a path to nowhere. And something happens and she basically becomes a zombie, much to her chagrin. And she is, you follow her, and what is her name? Her name is Angel, and you follow her trying to find out how this happened to her, and what she's gonna do about it. And it is written, there are some laugh out loud funny parts. I listened to this, and the narrator did a fantastic job, given that Cajun, Louisiana, down south accent, white trash, lilt to her storytelling. And it was just super, super fun. This is the first in a series, and I haven't gotten to the other ones yet, but I definitely will be getting to those eventually. So many books, right? I gave this one 4 stars. Coming in at number 17 is Sadie, and this is by Courtney Summers. This is a YA mystery, and this, you might have heard, they might have talked a bit about this on BookTube. I listened to this, and I would highly recommend, there it is, take a shot, listening to this if you want to read it if you haven't read it yet. Because it's told multiple perspectives also, and it's told from Sadie's point of view, and it follows Sadie. Basically, she is going after, she's a young woman who is gonna try to find out who murdered her younger sister. And then, so it's following her doing her own investigation, but at the same time, it's following this podcaster who does true crime podcasts, and he's doing a podcast because Sadie has gone missing as well. And he's kind of doing his or her, I don't even remember, investigation and the podcast at the same time. So if you like listening to podcasts, you will like this book because part of it is told in kind of podcast format. There's a multiple cast for when he or she questions people in Sadie's life for the podcast. So there's like interviews, and it was just a really, really fun ride. Yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers. There will never be spoilers here. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Very much enjoyed Sadie, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Coming in at number 16 is Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This was a pretty popular book as well. This is historical fiction, and it follows 2 timelines and 2 different perspectives. But what I found most interesting about this book is that there's an orphanage in this story that actually existed. It was called the Tennessee Children's Home Society, and it was run by a woman named Georgia Tan, evil incarnate. Basically, she had the help of law enforcement as far as other organizations. Basically, they would steal children from poor people who had no recourse and adopt them out to rich folks who could pay money for them. And anyways, it follows a story, a fictional story, but in a true something that actually happened. These young kids, the fictional stories of these young kids who the parents leave their home to go to the hospital because the mom is pregnant and she's delivering her children, and then she leaves her 4 or 5 children behind. And while they're gone at the hospital, the police come and take them off to this orphanage, and they never see their parents again. And it follows their harrowing time at the orphanage. And then at the same time, the other timeline, and so that takes place back in the 30s, and then the other timeline is present day. And it follows this woman who is the daughter of a senator, well-to-do. She's in the public eye. And during a publicity event at a senior home, she meets a woman who is connected to the first storyline. I won't say how. I don't want to give too many spoilers. But this surprised me. I like this way more than I thought I was going to. Very, very interesting, especially what happened for realsies at this orphanage. I can't even believe this went on. But yeah, highly recommend. I do need a shot of coffee. And I gave Before We Were Yours 4 stars out of 5. Coming in at number 15 is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. You might have heard this one. They made Netflix, Hulu, I can never keep the platform straight, but they made a movie about this one starring Michael B. Jordan. This is the other nonfiction book on my list, and it basically is follows Bryan Stevenson, who is an attorney who fights for the rights of the marginalized folks who found themselves in prison for either committing crimes that they didn't commit or got unjust sentences that would have been a lot lower if for people who either had money or were white. And it also follows his setting up the program that he founded. What is it called? The Equal Justice Initiative. But so it tells his story of helping many people. The underlying story is telling the story of Walter McMillan specifically. I believe Jamie Foxx plays him in the movie, I believe. Anyways, and he spent years and years in prison for a crime that he did not commit, and Bryan Stevenson helps him. Really great story. I was afraid there was going to be a lot of kind of legalese, too much legalese in this book. There is some, but it's very easy to read. He makes it very accessible. And it's worth it. The book is absolutely worth it. Watch the movie too. They did a really good job with the movie, but obviously the book, there's way much more detail, information. Do both if you're so inclined. I gave this 4 out of 4 stars. 4 out of 5 stars. Sorry if the angle is weird. Booktube newbie and anyway, coming in at number 14 is Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi. This is a YA novel, and this follows 2 sisters, Jane and June. I'm not going to get them which one is which correctly, but they're 3 years apart. They're in their early 20s. They were very close when they were younger. When they got older, they moved to New York I believe at the same time. But once there, they kind of went their separate ways, and they are now estranged, and they're very different. One is got kind of a high-flying job in finance, has a posh apartment. The other is struggling in school, living in a shithole with a dirtbag roommate slash boyfriend. She is dealing with very severe self-esteem issues, dealing with an eating disorder, and just trying to find her way in life and not really having a good go of it. I believe it's June who is the one in the successful job and in the nice apartment. She gets diagnosed with cancer. She needs her younger sister's help, and so they're kind of thrown together and making their way through this issue. And it talks about, what I love so much about this book is the dynamic of the sisters. I don't have any sisters. I feel like I've always wanted a sister. I've always kind of envied people with that wonderful sister relationship. Anyways, and so talking about that dynamic is fantastic, and they're regaining their relationship and their relationship with their folks as well. So yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Coming in at number 13 is Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. I know that's, sorry about that. This is a horror novel, and it's dark. It takes place in a dystopian world where animal meat, has become poisonous to humans, and so you can't eat animal meat anymore. This follows Marcos, who deals in the human meat trade, and he struggles with it. He is conflicted for obvious reasons, and it tells his story. And he finds himself in a situation where I don't want to give a spoiler. It's dark, but it's fascinating. It's a pretty short read. I think it might maybe be right around 200 pages. You'll get through it pretty quickly, excluding the times you have to put the book down and kind of think about things. But memorable book. I thought about it for a very long time after, and I'm pretty sure I gave it 4 stars out of 5. Coming in at number 12 is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This one was talked a lot about. I probably don't have to say too much about it. This follows Vanessa. Obviously, she's an adult now, but she is a woman who had a relationship with her English teacher when she was, I want to say 14, but she never considered it abuse, and she maintained contact with that English teacher well into as an adult, But as an adult now, she gets contacted by somebody who wants her help because he's still abusing young girls. And it talks about her struggle of, you know, who is she now? You know, was it abuse? And she doesn't think that it was. But the more she learns about what he's doing with other girls, the more she questions what happened to her. And it also talks a lot about, it goes into detail, and it's very difficult to read, so trigger warning on this, about how this man groomed her to make her believe that it was her idea, that, you know, that she pursued him. It's, it's very well written. Very important topic, difficult to read at times, but I thought about it again, another one I thought about for a really long time, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. Coming in at number 11 is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't need to say much about this book. I am sure you have all heard all about it, and it is worth the hype. Let me just tell you, so much fun. It really took me by surprise. I don't even remember why I picked it up, because I think if I probably heard it on BookTube, and I'm like, oh, I'll give it a go. Because if I had read the back, I don't know if I would have just picked it up based on that. And as you know, it follows, basically Evelyn Hugo is in the golden years of her life, but she in her prime was a glamorous Hollywood star of the 50s, and she wants to tell her story. She never has given interviews, but she wants to tell her story, and she handpicks Monique Grant, who is a writer for a magazine. Not really any, you know, she's not well known or anything like that, and it's a mystery to her why Evelyn Hugo picks her, but there is a reason. Obviously I won't tell you. And she wants to tell her life story, and she wants to tell about all of her husbands that she had, and you know, why she married them and why it didn't work out. And there's a pretty decent twist in this book. There's actually a couple of them, and just a page turner, really well written. I listened to this one as well, and the narrator did a fantastic job. I know a lot of people talk about Daisy Jones and the Six and how you really should listen to that because there's multiple cast members. I don't think this was a multicast audio book, but it was really well narrated nonetheless. Anyways, great story. If you haven't read this yet, I get ready to take a shot because I highly recommend. And I gave this 4.5 stars out of 5 stars. We're in the top 10 now. Coming in at number 10 is The Fireman by Joe Hill. And if you don't know, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, and he is a hell of a writer. And this was my first Joe Hill, so I will be reading all of Joe Hill's. But from what I understand, I set the bar pretty high because The Fireman, I guess, is a really big favorite of Joe Hill's fans, and for good reason. This is, a lot of people compare this one to The Stand, and it's very similar, but it definitely stands alone for what it is. It is a post-apocalyptic horror novel, and you know, it happens, something bad happens where it causes what's called dragon scale, and it's this pandemic, and if you get it, it pretty much starts to leave this horrible charred stuff on your skin before you where you just explode with no warning. So it's very deadly disease. And anyways, this follows Harper, who's a young woman who she has the dragon scale, and she is also pregnant. And it talks basically how she survives, and she finds this group of people. And what the title refers to is basically the Fireman is a man who has developed the ability to control this affliction, for lack of a better way. And it kind of talks about Harper's relationship with him as well. It's a brick of a book. It's 600-ish pages, I believe, but it doesn't feel like it. If you read The Stand and you enjoyed it, you would like The Fireman. I gave this 4.5 stars out of 5 stars. Coming in at number 9 is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, and I know I don't have to say too much about this. This is my favorite Grady Hendrix. I think I have one more to read of his. I haven't read the Final Girl one. But so far, this one's my favorite, and for good reason, because I was a teenager in the 80s and this takes place in the 80s. So lots of nostalgic vibes for me. It follows Abby and Gretchen, who are 2 best friends in high school. And so much nostalgia, because I was one of those ones. I didn't have lots of friends. I had the one best friend in high school. And we did everything together. Anyways, so Abby and Gretchen in high school, something happens to, I believe, Gretchen, and she becomes, Abby believes she's possessed, and Abby wants to help her. And it talks about their adventure trying to get to exorcise the demon out of Gretchen. And it's fabulous. I had so much fun reading this book. I listened to this one as well. If you are a fan of Grady Hendrix and haven't gotten to this one yet, definitely get to it quick. If I didn't mention it before, this is adult horror, so just keep that in mind. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So good. Coming in at number 8 is The Reckless Oath We Made by Bryn Greenwood. You may have heard of Bryn Greenwood's other novel, All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, which is one of my all-time favorite books. She's a hell of a writer. All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, super controversial. That would have been number 1 on my list if I had read it last year, but I read it a few years ago. It's moved into one of my all-time favorites. But I finally read another one of hers. I don't know what took me so long, and it was great. It's a lot less controversial. This is it's not a romance, but it is kind of love story-ish, but not your conventional love story. So basically this follows Z, and she is basically she believes her sister has been abducted, and she goes looking for her. And she is accompanied by a young man who is on the spectrum, and he believes he is a knight, and he speaks in Old English, the whole 9 yards. He fights with a sword, and he accompanies her because it's in his mission in life to protect Z. And so they go on this adventure to look for, I believe Lorraine is her sister's name, and stuff happens, and it is a fantastic story. Bryn Greenwood, I can't wait to get to her other stuff. She maybe has 5-ish novels. If you haven't read her yet, she can write. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I want to say that the rest of the books on this list are 5 out of 5, with the exception of one. Coming in at number 7 is Mosquitoland by David Arnold. This is a contemporary YA, and this one took me by surprise. I listened to this, and it was a fantastic listen. This is the story of 16-year-old Mary, who she goes by the nickname Mim. Her parents get divorced, and her father takes her to Mississippi, I believe, be with the stepmom that she can't stand. And she finds out that her mom, who is back in Ohio, is sick. And Mim just needs to get back to her. She can't stand living with her dad and new stepmom. And so she hops on a bus by herself, runs away, and it tells about her adventures on the road, the people she meets on the bus, and then also kind of goes back in time and tells about her history with her mom and her dad. Fascinating story. Absolutely love this. I give this 5 stars. Coming in at number 6 is the one and only book that I actually have with me still, and that is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. You probably heard about this book. This is a fantastic read. You may have heard that this has been compared a lot to Bridget Jones' Diary. And there are some similarities. Basically, a young woman who is finding her way through life as a single young woman in England. And there is some humor in this. Her relationship with her girlfriend's hilarious. She has one particular friend who needs a book of her own. I can't remember that side character's name, but if you read the book, you'll know who I'm talking about. Hilarious and snarky and smart and just super funny. But Queenie herself, this book is so much fun. But if you go into it thinking that you're going to curl up with a light, easy read, or I should say just a light read, fluff, this is not fluff. There's a lot of dark themes in this book. Queenie is dealing with some mental health issues. She makes some really bad choices as far as sex partners. She puts herself in some terrible situations, and it talks about how she deals with them. And I love how this book was written. It talks about how her white boyfriend breaks up with her and how she deals with that. She is a writer at a magazine or newspaper, I can't remember, and she wants to write really important articles that pertain to, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement, but she's not allowed to do that. And she's really just finding her way in the world. And it's, I don't want to say wonderful because it's not an easy journey for her. But it is fascinating to follow Queenie's journey. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Top 5. Ooh, so exciting. So number 5 is I think the only non-5-star book on my top 10. It's bizarre. And before I talk about that, so what makes a 5-star read for me is multiple criteria. Is it written well? Are the characters relatable? Are the characters fleshed out? Is there a good plot that keeps me wanting to know what's going to happen next? And I think that one little thing that will tip a 4.5-star book to a 5-star is how it made me feel at the end. So it might have all those other things, perfection, and then if it doesn't have that one little thing of, oh my God, I love this book so much, where you want to hold the book to your chest at the end, then it won't get. So anyway, coming in at number 5 is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And don't get me wrong, I love this book. And it was probably, I don't get into sci-fi much. And even if you don't, I would highly recommend, take a shot, this one to start because it's very relatable. This one and The Martian. The Martian would have made this list if I read it last year as well. The Martian, I want to say, is like the first science fiction book that I've ever read. And so really, really good, very relatable, very easy to read, even though there's sciencey stuff in there. Anyways, Dark Matter, this is a sci-fi thriller, and it's more of a thriller than sci-fi. And it basically, it follows Jason. He's this mild-mannered college professor, and one night he is abducted by a masked man, and he wakes up in a world that's not his own. And basically it deals with the concept of the multiverse, how there's different parallel universes, and he is trying to find the person who did this to him, and B, trying to find his way back to his world. And it is fascinating, and I probably read this in 2 days because I could not put it down. I mean, it was constant action, and I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5, only because, I mean, constant action, love this book, will always recommend it, well written. The characters were, you know, I felt like I knew Jason, but of course it didn't, at the end, it didn't give me that, oh, I love this book so much. So that was the only reason it didn't get 5 stars, but that is number 5 on this list. Coming in at number 4 is Anxious People by Frederick Bachmann. Is it Bachmann or Bachmann? Frederick Bachmann. You've all heard of this book. I actually read the physical book on this, but I passed it on as soon as I could because everybody needs to read this book. And how do you explain this book? I probably don't need to describe it because you've all heard about it, if not read it. But basically, a bank robbery happened. The person who does the bank robbery flees, and they go into an apartment building, and into this apartment where a vacant apartment is being shown, and there are multiple couples in there, along with the real estate agent. And it basically talks about who these people are. They're all very different. There's a lesbian couple there looking at this apartment. There's an older couple there looking like an elderly couple looking at this apartment. There's a newly married couple there with like a baby on the way. They're looking at this apartment. And then there's a couple of there's a character that kind of pops up unexpectedly, and his story is hilarious. I don't want to give too much away. There's a twist. There's a couple of twists, I think, in this book. And it's the kind of book I would recommend reading the physical book because I felt like I needed to go back to the beginning to look at some stuff. And it wasn't in a bad way. It's just written so well that you're tricked a little bit. And I don't want to say more than that. And I absolutely loved it. I give this 5 out of 5 stars. Yes. And I think the only other Frederick Bachmann book I've read is Ove. I can't remember the full title of it. Oh my gosh. But you know who what I'm talking about. Uwe, you know. Anyway, Bachmann is such a great writer, and I will be reading all of his books eventually. Coming in at number 3 is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Of course, this was all over BookTube, has been for a long time, and for good reason. Totally worth the hype. I am not into mythology or anything like that. But I bought into the hype and read it because of the hype, and I am so glad I did. You know, it's number 3 on my list. This was 5 out of 5 stars for me, and this one I was sobbing at the end of this book. Basically, it tells the story of Achilles but it's told from the point of view of Patroclus. And Patroclus is a young man who is exiled and sent to this place where he meets Achilles, and Achilles kind of befriends him, takes him under his wing, and they fall in love. And it tells their story. And I don't want to say much more than that, but it's beautifully written. And I absolutely loved it. I was sobbing at the end of this book, but in a good way. I love this book so much. If you are one of the 3 people that haven't read this book yet, I mean, maybe you think it's not your cup of tea. I haven't read Circe yet. I plan on it, but Song of Achilles was just beautiful. Very beautifully written as well. And yeah, number 3 on my favorites of 2021. Number 2 on this list is The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. This was beautiful. I listened to this, and it is narrated. I can't remember the name of the narrator. The narrator is an actor. The only thing I remember him, he's been in a bunch of stuff, but the only thing I remember him from is he was like one of the bad guys from True Lies. I'm dating myself. But anyways, beautiful voice, and just beautiful. This story was beautifully narrated. And such a great story. And this tells the story of Nuri and Afra, a married Syrian couple who it tells about their journey escaping a war-torn Syria to try to get to the UK. And they've also dealt with a very specific trauma, and because of this trauma, Afra loses her sight, and so Nuri has to take care of her. And so it tells not only the journey of Nuri and Afra from Syria to the UK, and they're going through Turkey, and they're going through Greece, and they're dealing with all of these obstacles, but they also, because of the trauma that they have suffered in their marriage, they're also trying to find their way back to each other. And it's just a beautiful story. I learned a lot more about the Syrian war. I believe that continues to go on, I believe. And it's fascinating and heartbreaking, but beautiful, just beautifully told. I will be reading Christy Lefteri's other works. The girl can write, and this book is just a beautiful, beautiful love story, with the backdrop of, a historical war in African nations, and just their journey across multiple countries. And if you like historical fiction, definitely pick this one up. It is so good. Finally, my number 1 favorite book of 2021. I haven't heard any other booktuber talk about this book, and gosh, I really hope you take my suggestion and pick it up. It is Boy's Life by Robert R. McGammon. I listened to this book. I haven't bought it yet, but I plan on having one for my library because obviously it's one of my favorite of all time. It's my favorite of 2021. For me, it checked all the boxes. It's a coming of age / mystery / magical realism. It takes place in the 60s. It's a coming of age of a young boy. His name is Corey. I want to say he's around 12-ish, and takes place, like I said, in the 60s in Deep South in a fictional town called, I believe, Zephyr, Alabama. And the story starts off with him helping his dad with his milk route, and they see this car go off the road and into the lake. And Corey's dad tries to help the person in the car, and he swims out there and sees that the driver has been handcuffed to the steering wheel and he's been beaten to a pulp, and I believe he's already dead, and he lets the car sink to the bottom of a very deep lake. And meanwhile, Corey, standing on the shoreline, sees a strange man off in the woods watching, and so this book tells the story of Corey trying to find out what happened to this man, and nobody knows who he is. There was no ID. They couldn't recover the body or the car because it was too deep, and of course it takes place in the 60s. Resources are a lot slimmer than they are today, and What more can I say about this book? It is so good. Now I'll warn you, it is a brick of a book. It's probably around 600 pages, but man, what a great story. And in the process of Corey trying to figure out what has happened, he runs into all these other shenanigans that just are just so fun to read about. You're gonna have to take one last shot for this video because I highly, highly recommend this book. If you like coming of age, if you like small town in the deep South, if you like a good mystery, if you like mysteries or any stories told in the 1960s, just all the vibes with all those things happen in this book, and you will not be disappointed. So those are my 21 favorite books of 2021. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find something new to read. I hope you increased your TBR by a few books at least. I am a huge fan of watching BookTube, and so I love watching my favorites, and I like to comment on some people's videos saying, oh my gosh, I read that and I loved it too. So if you agreed with any of these books, please feel free to comment. I would love to engage with some of you and have a conversation because like I said, the thing I love more than reading books is talking about books. So comment below if you read some of these and they were your favorites, or even if they weren't your favorites. I don't mind. Opinions are totally welcome here, even if they don't align with mine. And if your favorites weren't on this list, tell me what they were. I'd love to hear about them. Anyways, thank you again for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.